Welcome to Teaching with Teachers. I'm your host, Dylan Watson, and thank you for joining us today. On today's show, we will be looking at visual impairments. 1 in 2,500 children in Australia are diagnosed with some sort of visual impairment. A visual impairment can be described as the limitation of one or more functions of the eye. Some common visual impairments include sharpness or clarity of vision, the range of what you can see, or like myself, colour blindness. On today's show, we have two guests with us who will be talking about visual impairments and what you can do as a teacher to make sure that these students are included in the classroom. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our two guests, Dr. Gavin Netshell and Tiffany Drage. Thank you.
Hi, how you doing?
Thank you for joining us. Today's case study is on Emma. Emma is a 12-year-old girl in Bunbury. Her condition is retina detachment. She has had 9 operations on her eye and she can still only see to the tip of her nose. Emma has a hearing impairment as well. She gets assistance for the hearing condition, but she doesn't get anything for her sight. Emma does dance so she can stay active because it's without risk to hurting her other eye. Emma's impairment is retina detachment. Dr. Gavin, could you explain to the studio audience what retina detachment is?
Thank you, Dylan. In order to understand what retinal detachment is, we need to first have an understanding of the various components of an eye. So let's review a cross-section of the eye. First, you have the retina, which is the curved back layer of the eye and is covered in light-sensitive cells that recognize shape, color, and pattern. The retina is supported on the inside by the jelly-like vitreous, which fills the eyeball behind the lens. On its outer side, the retina is attached to the choroid or middle layer, which is rich in blood vessels. Nerve fibers leaving the retina bundle together to form the optic nerve. So light enters through the eye, the pupil, and is focused by the cornea and the lens so that a crisp picture can fall on the retina. The optic nerve then relays information to the brain. When a person has a detached retina, it means that the retina has separated from the back of the eye. Without treatment, retina detachment may worsen until the retina is completely detached from the eye and unable to send information down the optic nerve to the brain. This results in blindness. Around 1 in 10,000 people are affected by some degree of retinal detachment, with older people having a higher risk.
Thank you, Doctor. I see what you're saying. Tiffany, as a teacher with 25 years of experience, inclusion is a very important part of the classroom environment. What strategies could you put in place to ensure that Emma is included in the classroom?
Well, Dylan, inclusion means full presence of children with diverse abilities in all aspects of schooling and that other children are able to access and enjoy. This means regular classrooms have to adapt to meet the needs of all students. As for Emma, I would first like to suggest an individualised education plan. An individualised education plan is a written document intended to help in the delivery of education programs for students with special needs. An IEP includes the student's current performance, objectives and goals, and the services required by the student and the teacher. An IEP is a working document in which teachers can make notes, changes and updates in the teaching and learning process. Being visually impaired, Emma needs to be sitting at the front of the class with larger print if needed. Kids like Emma take time to complete work as they use more energy than other students and tend to tire towards the end of the class. I would even suggest that Emma is included in extra English classes, in order to catch her up. These suggestions would be a part of Emma's individualised education plan.
Thank you, Tiffany. Inclusion is a very important part. Dr. Gavin, in speaking to Emma, she is not able to participate in physical educational activities. What can you add about this?
Thank you, Dylan. People who are more susceptible to retina detachment have certain risk factors, such as the following: short-sightedness, advancing in age, prior retinal detachment in the other eye, which Emma has. So for Emma's case, she is particularly high risk as she has not recovered her full vision in her eye that has a detached retina, even after surgery, which is a 1 in 10 statistical odd. 90% of patients who have surgery for their detached retinas will receive vision back to some degree. So given that Emma has short-sightedness, prior retinal detachment in one of her eyes, and has lost vision as a result, Emma would be classified as a high-risk patient. Recommending non-impact sports would be a first priority, as any sport or physical activity can actually cause trauma to the uninjured eye, which is obviously undesired.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll make sure I keep an eye out. Tiffany, in listening to that, what alternatives could be put in place to ensure inclusion for Emma?
Well, as a specialist in physical education studies, I am constantly monitoring inclusion within the classroom. I can understand the risks and responsibilities. However, in physical education, Emma can quite simply just join in. She could use a beanbag instead of a hardball. She could be a scorer or a timekeeper. Students cannot simply just miss out. There is always another option for them. I personally find it quite disappointing hearing that students like Emma are sitting out for physical education, as it is fundamentally about involvement and interaction.
I see what you're saying, Tiffany. Moving on. If, as a teacher, what impacts would Emma face with interaction with peers, teachers, and the wider community?
Many children try to avoid directed attention and have a fine technique of avoiding asking for help when it comes to their schoolwork. With her peers, Emma shouldn't face any difficulties with interaction. As long as Emma understands her limits when being involved in activities, then there shouldn't be any issue. I am under the understanding that Emma completes dance out of school. I find this rewarding, and to know that even though she cannot participate in contact sports, that she is still included in the community display.
Interesting. Dr. Gavin, in looking at providing support for Emma and other visually impaired students and giving them social opportunities, are there any community support networks or organisations available for them?
Yes, there are. One of the support networks is the Department of Education in WA. It's called the Vision Education Service, and this is available for visually impaired students. As part of this service, a specialist will come into the school and work with both the student and the teacher. It will aid in giving the students the skills required to be a successful learner. It also works with the teachers in creating IEPs. Another service is Visibility, formerly known as the Association for the Blind of WA. Locally in the southwest, there are support groups in Bunbury, the Bunbury Short On Site Support Group, and in Busselton, the Low Vision and Blind Support Group.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm sure we'll keep an eye out for those. Next question is for you, Tiffany. What changes might a teacher need to make to provide Emma with better academic opportunities? And are there resources out there that will help teachers provide this better opportunity?
For Emma, extra help is needed at school. Although she might be at her year level, unfortunately she would still be behind her peers. Simply because Emma would have to move her head from side to side rather than just moving her eyes. This requires more energy and is where she gets left behind. For Emma and other students in this situation, extra help needs to be there, or they can quite easily slip under the radar. Children with visual impairments have unique educational needs, requiring the use of alternative teaching strategies, materials and technology. There are several relevant educational materials, such as the Vision Education Service, which offers professional development to teachers and university students to gain the skills and knowledge required to teach visually impaired students. The Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children provides quality education and therapy services. They offer resources on vision impairment and professional development for teachers based on the most up-to-date research on visual impairment. And finally, the TES Australia. TES Australia offers teaching resources from a large print poster to specific worksheets for IEPs.
Thank you. Those changes will assist Emma in becoming a very successful learner, and those resources will be a useful piece of kit as a teacher. Next question is for you, Doctor. How do you include the key stakeholders, such as parents, into dealing with visually impaired children?
Problems sometimes occur for students who are blind or visually impaired when the required processes are not in place, or people are unaware of their responsibilities. Therefore, it is important for me to pass on as much information as possible to the parents to help facilitate their child's learning. For other stakeholders, like teachers, it is equally important for them to establish a working relationship with the individual who, as a general rule of thumb, best knows their disability-related requirements. So at the beginning of a student's course, the teacher should arrange a meeting that includes the major stakeholders such as teachers, parents, specialists, and even other students who are going to be involved in the student's participation at school. Stakeholders meetings could cover topics such as relevant communication strategies, teaching and learning strategies, accessible format of study materials, library processes, access to specialized learning resources, provision of technology, assistive computer software, which are all very important topics. Out of all the above, it will obviously work best if all stakeholders are invested in providing the best learning environment for the individual with a visual impairment.
Very useful information. Now, Tiffany, same question to you, but as a teacher. How do you include the parents and caregivers?
Well, through constant contact to home from school allows the teacher to communicate more effectively with the parents and caregivers. I like to have at least one meeting a term with the case like Emma's on top of the usual parent-teacher meetings. Many schools use technology such as a program called Connect. It is quite simple yet effective tool which allows parents to log in and openly communicate with the child's teacher. Parents can see where their child is placed on a scale within the class. Students' test results can be uploaded instantly, having parents checking before their child is even home from school. This is a great tool for open communication and allows parents and caregivers to be included in their child's learning process.
Thank you guys, very useful information and important information for teachers. You never know, some pre-service teachers might even see this. As we have heard today, visual impairments can have a big impact on the students in the classroom. We have heard strategy to allow inclusion in the classroom, such as sitting up the front, using large print, and individual education plans. We have heard how visual impairments have impacted on the interaction with teachers, their peers, and the wider community. We have been given strategies on how to provide students with visual impairments better academic opportunities and where to find such resources. We have been given information on community groups and organisations that will help teachers, parents, and the child in developing positively. Finally, we have heard how to include important stakeholders such as parents and caregivers in their child's development. Thank you to our two guests for joining us today. It was very beneficial. Thank you for watching, and as part of watching, you will all be receiving an email with all the information from today's show. Lucky you guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode and most importantly added to your growing knowledge. Thank you, and check in with us next week.